Hey, good Wednesday morning, everybody. Brian Bledsoe with you here once again, host of the Desert Farmer Podcast. Good to be with you. We have a lot of weather to talk about in case you've been living under a rock or somewhere else that doesn't have access to the internet, social media, or any other type of weather forecast. We have a storm to talk about. And in some cases, this storm is going to be the biggest one that we've had so far this year. That's really not saying a lot, though, is it? I mean, we really haven't had a very active weather pattern in terms of storminess, really, for about the past couple of months. So this one is going to leave its mark on some folks. And even if you don't see a lot of snow or ice or whatever out of this storm system that's coming through, everybody's going to get colder. And in some cases, quite a bit colder from what we've been accustomed to through most of this year. Remember what's been going on, for the past couple of months. I mean, December was crazy warm. Most of this month has been very nice. So we are obviously due. And historically speaking, this is about the time of year when we can see some very large chunks of Arctic air make its way southward into the United States and, create some problems. So this is going to be just fine in terms of how we're going to navigate this storm system and how we're going to come out of it. But while it's here, it is going to be impactful for a lot of us. So, the main message that I want you to take away from today, and I'm going to be updating the Desert Farmer podcast over the next couple of days too, but the main message today with this storm is that the rest of today and tomorrow are just fine. And to be honest with you, even if we head into the early daytime hours on Friday, most of us are going to be okay. Now, does that mean we're all going to be warm? No. The warmest days by far are today and tomorrow. Friday, that's when we start to see some significant cold air move in from the north across the entire region. We'll get some of that in the northern part of the area on Thursday night, but the rest of us farther south get that on Friday. The storm system basically is going to do whatever it's going to do from later Friday through the daytime hours on Sunday. And there is a little part of me that wouldn't be surprised if the timing on this did slow down just a little bit. Sometimes that happens with these storm systems. But regardless if you see snow, rain, ice, or whatever, the Arctic air, and if nothing else, the much colder temperatures that are moving in, is not going to make it fun to be outdoors at all. So that's kind of the long and the short of it in a very simplistic way. I know a lot of you have been consuming a whole lot of weather information out there online over the past few days or so. So I really don't want to do that. With all the individual numbers and hammering snowfall down to the tenth of an inch and all that other trash, you know, each to their own with something like this. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be first to sacrifice being right on something like this. I'm not going to be first to sacrifice the message, which is by far the most important thing in this whole process. If you don't get the message right and the people don't understand the message, then your message was really for naught. So I'm going to do my best to break some things down for you to try to drive that message home here this morning. Let's look at our upper level weather pattern starting Friday morning, continuing through Sunday afternoon. So this is where we are on Friday morning. We've got cold upper level low pressure over east and southeast Canada. We've got another ripple of energy right here that is going to be very important. This one up here over the southwest prairies of Canada is going to be a big deal. And then we have this piece of energy here off the California coast, okay, that is another part of the puzzle. And that's another thing that I want you to recognize here. There are a lot of moving pieces with how this storm either comes together or doesn't come together for your particular region. And the two pieces of energy that I'm most interested in is this northern stream up here over southwest portions of Canada and this upper low that's off California, because we've got plenty of moisture and a tropical feed with this, and we've got plenty of Arctic air with the feed like this. So if we can get these two to come together and kind of party, then we have a storm to talk about. But if they don't come together in a good fashion and they become much more disjointed, well, then there's going to be some holes in who sees what with this storm system. Right now, most of our computer models are hinting at both of these pieces of energy coming together to produce a pretty good storm. So let me animate this for you and go forward, and you can kind of see how things play out. Eventually, this bigger storm system or this bigger piece of energy that comes southward out of Canada pretty much absorbs the tropical entity down here coming in from the Baja and also northern parts of Mexico on up into the southwest. And these two in conjunction work together to produce a pretty healthy storm in the middle part of the country. Now, again, not everybody's going to see this. And I can't really underscore that enough that there are going to be some areas that don't see a lot of anything out of this except some cold air. But for others, you're going to see the whole thing. But it's really important that if this piece of energy down here off the Baja ends up becoming more disjointed, going farther south, rocketing farther north, or whatever, it has huge impacts on what this means for our storm system here in the middle part of the country. Let's look at our forecast temperature animation here. So from Friday morning through Sunday afternoon. So to start on Friday morning, this is what it looks like. Pretty chilly stuff up here. Places like Shadron, Valentine, O'Neill, Norfolk, Nebraska, extending to Omaha, Des Moines, all the way over toward Madison and Milwaukee. That corridor there is going to start out anywhere from 0 to 20 below zero. Those are actual temperatures, folks, actual stuff. This is some chilly stuff coming in here. But farther south, this area here, okay, is ahead of that cold front. That cold front is pouring its way southward, and it won't take long to really encompass the entire region. But if you're starting out Friday morning and you're across most of Texas, your temperatures are okay, but you don't have to go too far to the north to really see those change. If we put this into motion, and again, I'm just going to let this animate. So find your place, all right? Look at the temperatures that are occurring where you're located. And if nothing else, you can see that it's going to be a pretty chilly go of it. And that cold air, yes, does make it eventually all the way to the Gulf of America, where temperatures along the Gulf are only going to be in the 30s down here by later in the weekend. A lot of folks are comparing this to the February of 2021 Arctic outbreak that made its way into the middle part of the country. Is it exactly like February of 2021? No. Is it far off? Not necessarily. All right. If you look at the individual temperature records that occurred with that, we will be close in some spots and in other areas, far removed. It doesn't matter one way or another. What matters is there's an impact here that has to be paid attention to, and that it's going to cause some problems for some folks, not just with the cold, but also whatever we see in terms of wind, snow, ice, or whatever. So let's focus on the wind part of this equation, because to me, at least in the plains, if we're talking snow, the next question is, what is the wind going to do? So starting out on Friday morning, this is what our wind speed and direction looks like. Again, coming around here from the northeast like that. Now, once you get down here from, say, Hobbs over toward, say, Midland and extending eastward over toward areas just south of Dallas, all right, you're still a little bit ahead of that front. But I want you to notice here where those stronger wind speeds are. These are sustained winds between about 15 and 20, 15, 22 miles per hour right there. That's not horrendous for this time of year, especially with an Arctic front coming in here. So there will be some wind on the leading edge of this, but while this wind is happening on Friday morning, it's not going to be snowing. All right. So the wind part of this equation, I think what happens here is that we see the worst of the wind come through. All right. And it won't even be horrible. All right. Gusts around 35 perhaps with this, but we've seen far worse. But we get the worst of that wind out of the way before we start to see the snow materialize, especially up here across Kansas, northern Oklahoma, and into the eastern panhandle, and even up here in eastern Colorado. And if you look at the wind here, yeah, you've got wind that's coming out of the east and southeast that probably help to facilitate some snow showers here along the Front Range. I'll talk more about that in just a second. But if we put this into motion, you can see what this does. Eventually, as that cold Arctic air oozes its way in from the north, the wind kind of settles down for a lot of us. We see that wind kind of reinvigorate here across parts of Texas and southwest Oklahoma. That takes place on Saturday night, and then it gets out of here. So is this a classic blizzard with wind and heavy snow? I wouldn't say that at all. What I would say is that there's going to be some wind stirring in the air that's going to take that Arctic air and make it feel even more bitter than it otherwise would. Okay. But in terms of 50, 60 mile an hour wind, no, we're not talking about that. That is not this storm. And not only that, but that type of high end wind gust is not occurring where we're going to be seeing a whole lot of snow out of this. All right. There will be some breeze shifting the snow around a little bit, but it's not going to be insanity. Okay. All right. Now, let's talk about what the future radar animation looks like. This is off the European model. So it extends out to the end of the day on Sunday. It's not perfect. There will be some changes with this. So take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But just to kind of put things in perspective here, we've got this huge Arctic high. That's almost a 1050 high right there, up there around close to Yankton, South Dakota, that is really helping to drive this cold air farther to the south. So this is where we start out Friday morning. Again, no snow falling through here, right? Okay. You've got a little ribbon of snow that might end up here across eastern Wyoming, northwest portions of Nebraska, but right here in the midsection of the country, okay, we're pretty much dry to start things off on Friday, even though that cold front's coming through. But if I put it in motion, you see that the snow showers blossom later in the day on Friday. All of that pink, all right, is ice. Freezing rain, sleet, ice pellets, that whole mess of precipitation here. And then the blue is obviously where you've got snow. The green is where you've got rain. All right. So there the area that has the best shot to see rain through the duration of this is obviously those areas farther south and southeast. And there's even some of those areas in the lower Mississippi Valley that are probably going to come out of this with some freezing rain, and some of it could be significant. But on the northern side of this, I think the whole layers, the every layer of the atmosphere on the north side of this is cold enough to make it all snow. So the farther, just know, the farther south and southeast you go, you're going to have some mixing to contend with. And those temperature differences there at different layers of the atmosphere are really tough to predict in advance. You kind of have to see how the storm gets in here and sets up. I don't envy anybody that is forecasting freezing rain, ice, or any of that kind of stuff. I would much rather be back in all the cold air, where the whole thing is going to be snow. But that's kind of the timeline, if you will, the transition of how things are going to move through. And as I said, this is going to change, no doubt. One thing that you may notice here, that on the north side of this, all right, on the north flank, there's a really sharp cutoff on the north flank of that for areas up here across east and southeast Wyoming, a good part of Nebraska, eastern Colorado, and northwest Kansas. Do you see how that drier, more Arctic cold air drives its way in from the north and dries the atmosphere out and then really focuses things down here farther to the south and southeast? That's another piece of this puzzle that's going to be complex enough to figure out. So I'm not going to be that person today that shows you you're going to get 8.75 inches of snow at your house out of this. I think that's stupid. No offense. I just think it's stupid because that's not how we measure snow, first of all. And to me, that is a model output that you're going to be chasing your tail around for the duration of yourself forecasting the storm. So, what I like to do with something like this is look at the probabilities within this model. And you know me well enough, you know I like the Euro products. For the sake of this argument, we are going to use the regular European ensemble. I am aware of the European artificial intelligence ensemble out there. All right. I use it plenty. And it is a little bit different from what I'm going to show you. In fact, it's a little bit more harsh with the dryness on the northwest side of the storm. But let's just look at the regular European ensemble. This is a tenth of an inch of liquid or greater. And by liquid, I mean you take any precipitation you get and you melt it down if it's frozen, and that's your liquid out of the deal. All right. If it's rain, you just measure it like rain. All right. But when you're talking about, snow, freezing rain, sleet, ice pellets, whatever, when all that stuff melts down, that's a liquid you get. So this model through Sunday evening is forecasting a tenth of an inch or greater of liquid at about 90 to 100% everywhere here in red. But you do see a little bit of a hole here up across southeast Wyoming, far southwest portions of the Nebraska Panhandle, north central Colorado, even a little hole down here along the Raton Mesa, which is interesting. All right. And certainly a hole once you get north of that line right there into that bitterly cold, dry Arctic air. What about a half inch? All right. So this is at a half inch of liquid or greater. And I'm going to kind of paint that 50% line in here. All right. Something like that. All right. So anywhere down here in the orange and the red, you're looking at some pretty good probability, certainly greater than 50%, that you're going to see a half inch of liquid or greater. But look at on the northwest side here. It doesn't take long to shave those tenth of an inch or greater thresholds off across eastern Colorado, southwest and western Nebraska, and also west and northwest Kansas. This is a very easy theme to figure out here, folks, because the farther east you go, the higher the probabilities are, the more certain that you're going to get something. But for folks back here to the west, do you see some holes here in eastern New Mexico, West Texas, the Northwest Panhandles? I still have question marks, okay, and I'm going to paint a pretty big one on here about what these areas back here farther west see. I think if you live in the eastern Texas Panhandle, I think you're in much better shape than areas farther west. And by better shape, I mean the confidence in that forecast and getting some of those higher totals is better than areas back to the west. Some things can go awry back here to the west. I'm not totally convinced of that just yet. But we still have to look at the probabilities and say, hey, there is some there. But just notice, at least with a half inch or greater threshold, look at the gradient here from, say, around Childress all the way up here toward Dalhart. Pretty significant gradient right there across the panhandle in that probability. At an integrator of liquid, then you really hone in on areas right here. All right. You still have some of those higher probabilities on that northwest flank, which is kind of a testament to this storm getting with it for some folks, especially for southeast Kansas and down here across a good part of Oklahoma. But by the time you get back here to the panhandles and farther northwest, you're completely out of that. And then if we push it to 2 inches of liquid or greater, okay, you really get this quadrant that's there. Pretty impressive liquid for some areas, no doubt about that. What we can do also with this is put it in context of snowfall probabilities too. All right. At 3 inches or greater through Sunday. I'm going to break this down by state here, or at least by region. So this is for Colorado. And you can see that those higher probabilities of over 3 inches of snow are mostly confined back here into the mountains. Out here on the plains, okay, you basically have very, very low probability or nothing, all right, in that area that I highlighted right there. Areas farther east, you start to see an uptick in those probabilities. You got about a 22% probability right there around Goodland, but you don't have to go too far to the east and southeast to see that pick up. Even down here around Elkhart, Kansas, look at that 66% probability of 3 inches or better. What about Lamar? 8%. All right. So that gradient on the north and northwest side, I cannot underscore enough on this particular storm. It's certainly something we're going to have to wrestle with. If we look at southern Nebraska, Kansas, down here to northern Oklahoma, that some really impressive probabilities here for the majority of the area. And if we wanted to draw, just say the 50% or greater threshold, you're probably looking at something like that. Okay, along and east of that line, your probabilities are 50% or greater, that you're going to be seeing over 3 inches of snow. And you can clearly see where those darker reds are here. All right. That's where your highest probabilities are because that's where the storm really, really comes together, especially over south central and southeast Kansas. But even back out here to the west, we're still doing okay. If we look at New Mexico, a lot of those higher probabilities are in the mountains. But again, you've got some pretty good probability in this sector as well. All right. Coming westward out of the Texas Panhandle and in east central New Mexico. I mean, that's at 82% there at Tucumcari. That is 64% at Dalhart. That's a 42 there in Clayton. All right. That's a 90. Okay. Right there, close to Amarillo. We got a 52 there in Plainview and a 42 in Lubbock. So you can see either side of that line, those probabilities go down quite a bit. And if we broaden it out even more here across Texas, and again, just keep in mind, this is over 3 inches of snow. The probability is over 3 inches of snow. You can see what we've got here. Now, areas farther south, all right, through this sector are going to have ice to deal with. So that's why you see it tailing off once you go farther south. So when you go south here, think that there's going to be some ice in here, all right? That's where we're probably going to have that battleground as far as the temperature goes. I don't know exactly how that's going to play out. I don't think anybody does because the models are still going to be having a hard time figuring out that temperature profile right there. But those are the probabilities that 3 inches or greater. What about probability of 6 inches or greater? Let's look at that. Here across Colorado, basically no probabilities of that east of the mountains. Okay. What about Kansas? Same story. Do you see how those probabilities really shrank farther to the east? So by the time you get, I'm just going to put on about the 40% probability here line, areas along and east of that line, your probability of getting over 6 inches of snow is greater than 40%. And you can see the area right there along and east of there that gets hammered more. Back here to the northwest, again on that gradient, there's a better probability for that lower end range of snow than there is the greater end. See, these probabilities are easy to read. I think they make a lot of sense in a storm system like this, and really for all storms, because using an ensemble product, it really helps you see where the greatest impacts are most likely. It's not always about getting it down to the 10th of an inch in terms of snowfall. It's about the impact. And that's what these probabilistic forecasts really try to drive the point home in, because they're important. If we look at back across New Mexico, you can see those little higher probabilities here. I mean, right there, around Plainview, we got 20% probability. But if you go up here to Tucumcari, a little bit better. Also up here around Amarillo, all right, a little bit better than that. And if we widen things out here, just simply know that those more concentrated probabilities are in that area of concern here. And if I'm in the Texas Panhandle, I would say that there's an even greater probability. I don't think it's just 1-to-1 here, where you've got in the 30s here around Amarillo and Dumas, or around 50 around Amarillo and Dumas, and then you come over here to Canadian and you're up to 58%. I think that tells a story, because the farther east you get, the more snowfall potential you're going to have out of this. What about a foot or more? None of that in Colorado. Basically, none of that in Kansas, but I'd be lying if you didn't look at these probabilities here over southeast portions of Kansas and down in Oklahoma. And yeah, the fact that they're there, I wouldn't be surprised to see somebody get more than a foot of snow over southeast Kansas and down here into Oklahoma. New Mexico, some higher probabilities in those southern mountains, but down at lower elevations, not so much. And then on a wider view, okay, notice where those higher probabilities are. Even greater than 10%, okay, is something to pay attention to here. From central and eastern Oklahoma on up into southeast Kansas, southwest Missouri, northwest Arkansas, right in here through the Ozarks. All right, there's definitely some things to pay attention to where snowfall totals could exceed a foot out of that. What about the winter storm warning? Some of you like these in terms of the highlights, whether it's winter storm watch, warning, whatever. So this is a pretty good product to focus on. And again, it just reinforces everything that I've been telling you in terms of this storm, that the farther east you go, the more of an impact this storm is going to get for you. So the maximum probability of exceeding winter storm warning criteria. By winter storm warning, that would be heavy snow, some gusty wind, cold temperatures, trifecta, okay? We're not talking blizzard here. We're talking what is technically defined as a winter storm warning. Anywhere you're seeing these reds, that's where that impact is likely going to be the most significant. And I'll do you one better. Anywhere you're in this purple, that's where those impacts are likely going to be even greater. Does that mean we can fall asleep up here if we're in the yellow or the kind of aqua blue color? No, it doesn't mean that. It just simply means that with everything that we know right now from a modeling standpoint and what this storm looks like, that these areas that are highlighted in that red and that purple have the best chance to see the highest impact. That means in terms of travel, that's going to be a mess, whether you're seeing, rain, sleet, snow, whatever, freezing rain. It's going to be a travel mess here in the middle part of the country. There's no question. I would absolutely expect roads to be shut here. I would absolutely expect airline travel to be impacted here with flights canceled and whatnot. But on the northwest flank, you can really see how that impact probability decreases by quite a bit. It's a really simple thing, and yet I don't think it gets talked about nearly enough in terms of this probabilistic forecasting using the ensembles from these particular models. And I drive this point home all the time, folks, to my clients that I talk to. They're sending me, snapshot photos off of Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, people going off the deep end about stuff, and they come back to me and they ask me, is this real? And a lot of times, what I will do, I will just simply point them to the probabilistic forecasts and what I do, because it is almost always the most accurate and the most measured way to go about doing things. Look, I understand that there are different ways to do things. This is how I do this. All right. I've been doing it for a long time. I've been doing it in terrain. I've been doing it in the plains, whatever. But the thing about the internet or social media nowadays is it's always going to show you the worst case scenario. How often does the worst case scenario play out? Usually doesn't. Does that mean that you ignore the worst case scenario? No, you can't, because you're looking at a range of probabilities here. It's like I said, folks in southeast Kansas and across a good chunk of central and eastern Oklahoma need to be prepared for amounts that could exceed a foot. It depends on how things shake out there, but that area, you at least have to recognize there's some pretty high end potential. Now, areas on the northwest side where those probabilities are less, well, then that puts my mind and my heart more at ease, all right, to say that, well, those high end totals that one model run could throw out there are probably a lot less likely. Okay. Uh, it's a way of forecasting that you may not like to look at. It may be boring. I don't care. It is, in my opinion, the most responsible way to go about this thing. And there is a whole awful lot of irresponsibility going on out there, in my mind, as far as weather forecasting is concerned. But you know what? It's the way of the world. It's the way of the internet. It's the way of social media. So, folks, that's what I have for you today. There's also other weather to talk about beyond this storm system, but let's just simply eat what's on our plate for the time being, and then we'll kind of take another stab at it here. But if you leave this podcast here, knowing one thing, just know that the forecast details with this are going to change. They always do. So if you've been looking at a lot of these things, expecting one thing or another to take it to the bank and be the end all be all for this, don't do that. Just stay current with the forecast. I'll do my best to help you out. And as I always tell you, if there's something I can do for you in this type of medium and in this manner for your business, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I have my contact information there. You can always email me, Brian at brianbledsoeweather.com. You can simply go to Brian Bledsoe Weather and hit that blue button in the middle, and I can get you a quote. Just make sure you put your email and your phone number in there so I can get in contact with you. I hope you folks are well. Thanks for tuning in today on the Desert Farmer Podcast, and I'll be chatting with you again here real soon.